Well, welcome back to Streets and Eats, everyone. This is episode 59, and we're going to talk about one of our favorite things that we've ever done, and that is drive the iconic Pacific Coast Highway.
Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries and all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure. We've been doing a lot of travel planning recently for the summer that's coming up. We're heading off to a conference in Greece in May.
We've got a couple of road trips lined up. So Greece is one of them. We're going to take at least 3 days and road trip with our mother-in-law.
That's right. So all these things we talk about in our podcasts for the planning, we've been going through that. We've got a Google Map set up. We've got a Google Doc set up. We're all sharing information about what we want to do in different places. And it's just a lot of fun. I love that part of the planning process.
Well, I think the planning is definitely one of the most memorable parts of the trip, right? Because you're getting all excited about the trip.
Yeah.
But we're going to do probably a road trip in Greece. Then we're going to hop over the sea and go to Turkey. I don't know if we'll rent a car there, but we might.
We could.
We've driven there before, and
it's an easy country to drive in. The cities can be difficult, but the country itself, once you get out of the cities, is
not bad.
Always been pretty good. They have good highways. Yeah. I'm not sure about Greece. We've only done a little bit of driving in Greece.
We have a whole road trip.
That's true. We did a trip from Athens up to Thessaloniki.
Exactly.
So this time we're going to be starting from Athens and going down in the Peloponnese.
And doing the whole Penelope. I can't say it. Guess I better learn that.
The Peloponnese Peninsula.
The whole peninsula, yeah. And then we're thinking of going to Azerbaijan. We might rent a car there.
Yeah.
We probably will rent a car there.
Have to look into that one.
And then from there, we'll be going into Central Europe. And Central Europe will definitely be renting a car. We're definitely going to rent a car in France and drive to Germany. How long we keep the car, that'll depend on what we really feel like we're doing. We haven't quite got there. And then we're going back to the States and we'll road trip there.
We road trip everywhere.
Because we love to road trip. The thing I love about road tripping is the flexibility and the fact that I can stop. I can go to the bathroom. I can go to the restaurant. If it's 2:00 in the afternoon, I can go get a burrito if I want to go get a burrito. I don't have to worry about the bus schedules or the plane schedules or the train schedules. At least on trains, you can eat. But you have to already have your stuff. And
there's definitely a schedule. You have to be on the train when it departs the station, and you have to get off when it gets there.
Well, we have been on trains that, like in India, where they'll, as you're going through and you're slowing down, they'll put stuff through the window. So, I guess it really depends on where you are in the world.
I've done that on road trips too, where you just kind of slow down as you're driving through the rest stop, and here comes meat on a stick if you want it, or drinks.
One of the things I remember, one of our road trips in Morocco, you can read about it on our blog, but it was just so much fun. It was orange season and everybody everywhere was sharing oranges. And we just got many, many oranges.
Couple kilos.
And every time we stopped and we, got directions or we waved to somebody, we just handed oranges out the window and everybody was so happy to get them. It was orange season and everybody was happy.
Oh, that was a really good icebreaker for taking photographs.
Uh-huh.
Because in a lot of places around the world, people don't want their photograph taken, and Morocco is no different. But as soon as we offered an orange and said hello, we became instant friends and sure, take my picture.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Anyway.
So on this road trip, though, we're in the States and we're in California. Well, I say California, but really the Pacific Coast Highway. It can mean different things to different people.
But the majority of it really is like the California coast.
Yeah.
That's what people think of, I think.
If you're talking about the Pacific Coast Highway, it's really just a stretch of State Route 1 through Orange County, Los Angeles, and Ventura County.
All the way up to San Francisco.
No.
Not even that high?
The designated Pacific Coast Highway is from where it starts in Dana Point in Southern California, and then up along the coast to Santa Barbara. Mm. And after Santa Barbara, Highway 1 becomes the Cabrillo Highway, named after the Spanish explorer that they give credit to finding California. And then further up, it becomes a different name.
Okay, so what we did, though, is we started at Dana Point, right where, in fact, we even got pictures of the starting point.
There's a sign right there.
Yeah. And then we went all the way up to Olympia and further, actually.
Yes.
So in Washington. So when we say we drove the Pacific Coast Highway, we drove that baby all the way up.
Yeah. So whether you call it the Coast Highway, the Pacific Coast Highway, it's not all Highway 1, it's Highway 1 and 101. And then there's a couple other little side routes that even get you closer to the coast or in some areas into more interesting things than what the route or the highway does. But it's still following that same general direction up along the coast. And it goes all the way up to Olympia. And some people will even tell you that it goes all the way up to the Canadian border. So to do that, though, you have to get on Interstate 5 and drive up Interstate 5 to get to the border, which in that area is pretty close to the coast. But it's not really a coastal highway.
It's not a coastal highway at that point.
And it's not, I mean, yes, Seattle is a cool city and you should definitely go there. But it's a different experience. It's not really a road trip, I don't think.
Yeah. Anyway, we went all the way up to Olympia and we loved it. I mean, I found that the wildlife was spectacular.
Yeah, we saw all kinds of stuff.
And we went south to north. A lot of people suggest you go north to south because you're right on the edge of the road and you can see over. I don't think it makes that much difference. Personally, we went south to north and I mean, I thought it was gorgeous the whole way. So,
well, if you're going north to south, the pullouts are on, like the coastal side pullouts are on your side of the road. So they're easier to get to the pullouts. But we never had any trouble like crossing the lane to get to a pullout.
And we did it in summer. We did it in June, I think.
Yeah.
July.
Well, we had less traffic too, heading north than what you get heading south because more people will drive it in the southern direction. So that's another benefit, I think. And also, if you're going north to south, the sun's in your eyes. Like at least all afternoon, if not all day, which I don't really like driving like that. And it makes it hard really to see the views. And also, last thing, when the sun's coming towards you, if there's any haze at all in the sky, you see it. It's hazy. But if you turn around and look the other way, it's a lot clearer.
Yeah.
So the views can be clearer that way too. So that's my actual preferred direction.
Well, we don't know. We haven't driven it the other way. We've only driven it one direction.
No, I've driven it both ways. As a kid, our road trips, I would say once a summer, we were at least on one part of the Pacific Coast Highway when we lived in California, either going up to El Capitan or going south down towards Dana Point, going to the different beaches, camping. That's kind of where we went if we weren't going off into the mountains. So we were always one way or the other in our Volkswagen van up and down the road.
Well, I've only done it one direction.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. And I'm sure if I had done it the other direction, I would have enjoyed it. I think if you have a choice, then maybe you can weigh this. But, a lot of times you're just going to do what works into your itinerary. So
that's right.
Then it's up to you. And sometimes you can do it both ways. And how much of it is up to you as well.
And how long you spend. Really, how far you're going to go on it could be determined by how much time you have for it. If you've only got a couple of days, you might want to just do the stretch from San Francisco down to Santa Barbara, for instance, or down to LA. I think that's probably the most iconic section of the whole coast is that Big Sur region, which is really beautiful.
Big Sur is pretty. I think it's just washed out recently and they're in the middle of repairing it.
Spoiler alert, the highway is closed as of January 23rd or something, 2023. And at this point, they don't have an opening time yet. And that happens pretty frequently. So if you're planning a road trip on the Pacific Coast Highway,
just know you're going to skip Big Sur.
Yeah, through Big Sur, just be ready to change your plans.
For a detour. You can still see most of the stuff that's on the way, though.
Oh, yeah. And even like right now, you can do the detour. Like if you're heading north, you could do the detour and stay in Carmel by the Sea and then spend a day driving back down the coast into Big Sur and seeing all the sights and then just driving back out at the end of the day.
It's just not a through road.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you can work around it, but just be aware that might take a little extra planning.
Oh, do you know where it's closed right now on the way north?
Where?
San Simeon. Do you know what's at San Simeon? That is where, in fact, I think I read the actual gate is at right after the pullout for the elephant seals.
Yeah, I thought that was where the elephant seals were. And that is something really, really, really amazing. Why is that washed out?
Well, that's just because there's no way to route traffic after that point before the washout. It's several miles away, but because there's no side roads from that point forward, that's where the road's closed.
So the detour you are going to have to...
Like at San Simeon, you head up towards 101.
Oh, well. I mean,
but you can get to the elephant seals. That's the important thing. I was
going to say, as long as you can get there. I think that that's a key stop.
Oh, yeah.
On the PCH. I mean, you have to be able to see those elephant seals. And they, so I was expecting when I was doing some research, there's some amazing photos online, but you think to yourself,
it's not going to be that really
going to be that close? Well, I was surprised to find it was pretty close. And they do have a nice walkway and whatever.
Interpretive area.
Yeah, I loved it. That was one of my favorite stops because you can see the wildlife right there and they're always there.
And they're
used to people. And the people must be very good at not bothering. Those are huge animals. I would not want to mess with them.
They're gigantic. I have to agree, even though like as a child, I lived all over that coast. I don't think I ever saw the elephant seals.
Oh, no.
Even in a zoo or anywhere, definitely not in the wild. And to have them right there on the beach. Now, you're not like walking right up to them or anything like that. The boardwalk is on a cliff overlooking the beach.
It's not really a cliff.
Well, okay. An embankment, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like 20 feet down at least. But then they're right on the beach right out there and they're out in the ocean. They're
everywhere. I enjoyed that part. But okay, so we started in Dana Point and really, I thought Dana Point itself was,
yeah.
I mean, so first of all, let me preface this with my disclaimer. And that is, I am not a beach person. I love walking on the beach. I love beach sunsets.
The views.
I love the views, but I don't want to sit on a beach. So what we tend to do for beaches is we'll pull in, we might park for a while, we'll wander around a little bit, we might take our shoes off and walk in the splashing and that kind of stuff. But
maybe
we
have
don't.
A picnic.
Yeah, but we don't spend tons of time at beaches. And one of the things that you can do and spend tons of time at is all these beaches all the way up the coast. And you can do beach after beach after beach. You can go surfing. You can go swimming. You can go grilling. You can just do whatever you want. And that's what plenty of people do. That's not what we did. We were much more interested in the wildlife and the views and the food,
the history
and just enjoying being together, because that's what road tripping is good for.
So that stretch from Dana Point, it's right on all those big California beaches as you're heading north, all the way up to pretty much Ventura, I think is. Well, when you drive through Los Angeles, there are some beach areas, but it's also very urban. But you do go through Venice Beach and Santa Monica. My favorite beach, of course, is Huntington Beach. That's where I grew up as a kid. And that is a beautiful, huge beach. But there's a lot of...
I think mine was Pismo.
Yeah, further north.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of really cool, even in that Southern California area, which is really populated. There's some really quiet, like hidden coves. We used to go to this one called Pirates Cove in Newport Beach. You park the car above, you go down onto one of the main beaches. And I don't know if it's still this way. I don't think it is, but it used to be you walked through like a sea window, a little cave to get to this little secluded cove beach. It was really cool. We used to love going there. The beach is still there. It's still called Pirates Cove. I don't think the tunnel is open anymore.
I think the access is a little easier now.
And the access is a little bit easier, but it's still a beautiful, really small beach, not like Huntington Beach, for example.
It's huge.
It's
massive.
Miles and miles of sandy beach, and it's beautiful. But I really like those little coves like that.
Yeah,
that have a nice
I think I
sandy
prefer
strip
them too.
So those are really nice.
I think one of the funnest places great English I have. One of the best places we stopped was in San Juan de Capistrano and the mission there. That was you always hear about this mission, and I had wanted to see it for a long, long time. So we finally stopped, and I just loved everything about it. As you first check in, if you have children, they have, of course, some information for children and things.
A little scavenger hunt.
And also, I think they had two. They had a general one and they had one for fourth graders because you may not know this, but fourth grade is the grade in American schools that they really concentrate on the regions of the United States and learning about products and processes and just how things were settled and why they were settled there and that kind of stuff. And so they even have a special fourth grade packet if you have a fourth grader, which is really interesting.
About all the missions in California.
Yeah.
Which is also a good tool to have
as you go up
for driving north, because it tells you about all the missions as you're heading north. San Juan Capistrano is one of my favorites too. Really beautiful. It was
so pretty. It was peaceful. We were not the only ones there, but I would say
it was not crowded.
It was not crowded at all. There was probably, 30 other
at the most
people there, but it was enough spread out and everybody, for the most part, went off and did their own thing. So you didn't have any trouble getting photos or anything like that. And it was a beautiful place to take photos. If you're an Instagrammer, you need to get dressed up and go there. I mean, it was just
beautiful gardens,
stunning.
The ruins. It's just gorgeous. Heading north from there, we also did a boat tour out to the Channel Islands National Park.
Was that north?
Yeah, that's out of Oxnard or Ventura, either way.
It is. And that was, the national park is stunning.
Yeah.
And the boat ride is just really fun. And what was great about it is we didn't do any prior planning for that.
We were able to just walk up,
so to speak, and said, "You got any tickets?" And they said, "Yep, on our 10 o'clock sailing." And I think it was, 9:30 or something. And so, we didn't have to wait long. We basically bought our tickets and pretty soon after that loaded up the boat. And there was I think there was plenty of room. There's like room for 50 or 75 people. But again, there was only like 30 people on our boat.
Yeah.
It was quiet and the ride out there was beautiful. Seeing those islands is spectacular.
There's a ranger on board that's giving a talk about the wildlife and the history of the islands. And you just go out and tool around the islands and look for sea life and wildlife on the islands and then back in.
You could stop, but nobody in our trip did. And there were some kayakers out there. If you're interested in that kind of thing, you can kayak out there. I think if I were to go back, I would want to kayak out there because I think that sounded really fun.
One thing we didn't do on this trip, but I think a lot of people really love to do is the Santa Monica Pier.
We've done that before.
We've done that before. It's a pier with a Ferris wheel, other rides. It's like a carnival out on the pier. And that's really picturesque. It's definitely worth some photos. And you can spend some time there too. And of course, you're driving through LA. There's all kinds of stuff to do in LA.
Like where's the La Brea Tar Pits?
La Brea Tar Pits.
Yeah, because we did that and that was really fun. And they have a nice interpretive center.
Like Disneyland is pretty nearby, Hollywood, all that cool stuff. You could definitely make a trip to Los Angeles and just drive that stretch of the Pacific Coast Highway for a 2-day or 3-day trip and just really do the official highway from Dana Point to Santa Barbara and back. And that would easily fill a vacation.
We didn't go, but I wanted to. The Santa Cruz Surfing Museum.
Oh yeah.
Remember we stopped. It's just the venue itself was pretty cool because it's in a little lighthouse brick building. It was really neat, but it was closed when we were there.
Yeah.
So we must have been there.
That happens. On that trip, we were driving our Jeep, right?
I think we were in the Jeep. Yeah,
that's right. And that was kind of the reasons that we had for doing it. We wanted to do a road trip. Our Jeep had just been shipped to the States in California, where our daughter was, and we needed to get it up to Tacoma in Washington, where our other daughter was. So we had the time. We didn't want to just get on I-5 and drive up I-5 over a couple of days. So we drove along the coast, and the Jeep was 4-wheel drive. It's an SUV.
But it didn't need to be.
Don't need that. But what is good about it is it's very roomy and the windows are nice and big because it's all about the view. You want to be able to see out the windows.
You want everybody to be able to see out the windows.
Yeah, exactly. Front seat or back seat. So it was really good for that. Great gas mileage? No, not really, but not bad gas mileage either. Some people, like, the dream is a convertible, right? Every time I've been in a convertible, I'm always thinking, can we put the damn top up, please?
Yeah, I don't like convertibles either. First of all, you're going to get sunburned.
Yeah.
You just can't.
And if you're not going to get sunburned, you're going to get wet or cold.
And your hair's going to whip in your face.
Yeah, not a big fan.
I'm not a big fan either. But there's a couple of, one of the things I really like looking at is lighthouses. And there's a few lighthouses is you go all the way up the coast.
Heading north, yeah.
Yeah, there's some in California, and then there's some really great ones in Washington, Oregon.
Yeah.
And yeah, all the way up the coast, you'll see some lighthouses, which are really beautiful to stop at. I mean, I think all of them, you could climb the tower if you want, but after you've, climbed one and marveled at the Fresnel lens, then, I mean, do you really need to climb them all? That's up to you.
Do you really need to climb them all? Well, really, I think the determination is the surrounding coastline. If you don't have a good view of the beach and the cliffs and the rocks and the water going away from the lighthouse, then climbing the lighthouse will give you some really good views of the coastline. But if you have that from the ground, then yeah, if you've climbed one lighthouse, you've kind of climbed them all.
Plus, for me, the view is just spectacular with the lighthouse in it.
That's right. It's almost more important to find those pullouts where you have a great view of the beach and the lighthouse on its little promontory out in the water. That's what I love too. Yeah, there are some really good ones. I think my favorite heading north out of Dana Point is probably Pigeon Point.
Pigeon Point?
Pigeon Point, which is like just south of San Francisco. So pretty far north. That's a really, really cool stretch of coastline with cliffs and jagged rocks all the way out in the water. It's really secluded. It's not really beach going area. It's not
it's not a
the
beach.
Southern
It's
California
rocky.
is like, if you go through that in the summertime, first of all, in Southern California, the Dana Point north part, it's going to take you hours and hours and hours
Well, especially on a weekend.
just to get like to Los Angeles, whether you stop or not. The traffic is so bad. And those beaches, it's like almost a nonstop beach almost all the way, with a few exceptions that we talked about, covered with people. But once you get north of that area, like up in the area past Big Sur and heading more towards San Francisco, and even further north after that.
Yeah.
It's rocky. It's just that
It's
really
more my kind of terrain, actually.
Yeah, it's that really beautiful coastline. And there are still some little beaches that you have to kind of walk down to or take stairs down to. And they're just like those little coves where you might be the only person on that beach. That's really cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. Pigeon Point was really, really pretty.
And it's really close to Pigeon Point. We haven't really talked about food yet, but that's where the pie, was it the Pie Ranch? Do you remember that place? A little old barn on the side of the Highway 1 that's called, I believe it is the Pie Ranch, but we'll look that up and make sure it's in the notes. And they make homemade pies right there. And that's
Okay, so
what
Jim
they're
and I
known
are
for.
a sucker for homemade pies all around the United States. And
Yeah.
we're always looking for homemade pies because I think pie is one of those things that's truly American. It doesn't have to be apple. It can be any flavor.
Mhm.
Strawberry rhubarb, one of my favorites. But really anything. And it's just when you get a really good homemade pie crust and everything is just amazing. So that's one thing we're always looking for. So that's why he brings it up.
Yeah, it's the Pie Ranch.
It is the Pie Ranch.
Yeah.
Well, then you get up to basically San Francisco. And of course you can spend
That's a destination all by
Yeah.
itself.
plenty, and we've got plenty of, articles on San Francisco. That's for sure. You definitely want to go down and see the iconic view of the Golden Gate Bridge. You can't miss that, and the Presidio. And if you spend any more time there or not, you've got to at least go north of there, and it starts to get even more rockier and more secluded and more just sort of out west feeling, I think.
Yeah.
And one of the places I thought was really cool, which is just north of San Francisco, is the State of California Park that's up there that had the seals in it. It's a California state park.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
I think it's called Golden Gate.
It might be part of the Golden Gate Rec area.
Yeah. Anyway, it's pretty cool. And they have seals just laying right by the road. Wow. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but but there's seals everywhere, and it's just it's hilly. The road gets much narrower
Mm-hmm.
and feels like you're on a backcountry road versus the highway.
Yeah, for a lot of the southern stretch, especially up until Santa Barbara, it's like
Huge. It's huge. It's
2
wide.
lanes, 4-lane highway, 2 lanes on each side. Some of it is even freeway, like as you're going from Oxnard into Ventura. But then once you get out of those areas, out of the civilized areas, it just drops down to that really iconic winding, narrow road right along the coast. That is just beautiful. I really like that stretch too. And that's where Muir Woods is, which is definitely a good stop for redwoods.
But you also had more redwoods going more north you go.
Yes.
And so you can actually stop and see redwoods quite a few times. Yeah. And up north in a little bit northern California, you've got this little funky redwood place that has like the Paul Bunyan and the wooden shoe and
drive through the tree.
Yeah, and drive through the tree. All these little quirky things that people always think about from the 60s.
So if you want to see the redwoods, but you don't have the time to stop, which hopefully you do, but if you don't, there is one stretch further up where you're getting into the Redwood National Park where you can leave the highway and there's a side road that kind of wanders through the park called the Avenue of the Giants. So you can go like for 10 miles where you're driving through the redwoods off the highway, but you're still parallel to it. So you don't have to turn around and come back or anything.
Yeah.
Basically, it's the same amount of distance, but you can take your time, you can stop.
And I don't even think you have to pay a fee.
No. And that's a really good alternative if you don't have the time to get out and hike around.
Yeah. And it's just beautiful. That dappled light coming through those branches of the big redwoods that just are super towering over you. So cool.
And the smell, I love it.
And then shortly after that, you go into Oregon. And then the Oregon coast is just stunning. And you have, it's kind of a mixture really, because you have the beaches, but you also have the rocks and you have these cliffs and you have these like sand, I guess they're rocks, but they kind of look like sand hills.
Oh yeah. Then there's also sand dunes. There's a whole sand dunes area. But I really love the beaches in Oregon. To just get out barefoot and walk on, the sand is like silky smooth. It's a different quality, I think.
Well, and I also think that there's so fewer people there. I mean, you leave California and, it's just, there's a lot of people in California. Yeah. And so you're always competing with people on the beaches, people on the road, whatever. But you get up into Oregon.
It's a lot quieter.
And it's just so quiet. And there are people there. And especially at the trailheads and at the beachheads and things like that. Beach parking lots, but they never seem to bother you.
No. Okay, but hold on. We left California before talking about my favorite food stop. The Pie Ranch is good, and definitely I would stop there every time. But even better is Tamales Bay.
The oysters.
And the oysters.
Is that still in California?
Oysters. Oh, yeah. That was still in California. Oysters on a half shell.
Oh, my gosh. It was gorgeous.
Shack on the side of the water.
It really, I mean, what's better than an oyster shack? I mean, it's just that in and of itself. So you come up to this little tiny shack and you see their shed open that has their like smoker or something in it, or
there's always something going on there.
Something, yeah.
Piles
I think
of
it's
oyster
a smoker
shells
and
everywhere.
Yeah, oyster shells everywhere, and it's tiny. It's tiny, and there were some tables inside, but they also have, which was better, in my opinion, and the weather was gorgeous. They have all along the railing. They have seats just looking out at the sea.
Deck on the water. That's the way to go.
It's not a wide deck.
No.
Because this is tiny, but it was still great. And then you just order, 6, 12,
24,
14 dozen.
However many you can handle.
Oysters, and it's delicious. And you're right. Now, ideally, we went for lunch because we were still driving and everything. But I'm sure that there's some hotels around there that you could maybe imbibe a little bit more than we were able to do.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways to do it.
But yeah, you're right.
Because it's very close to Napa. So get some good California wine, dozen oysters on the half shell. That is a good time.
That is a good time. But yeah, and then we were talking about Oregon.
Yeah, then we're into Oregon. I had to go back and talk about that.
I don't blame you. One of the first places we stopped, what was the name of that town? Bandon. Yeah. And that beach was, how many miles long is that beach?
Big beach, but it is beautiful.
It's at every turn, it's stunning. And there were lots of turns. And then while we were there, it was really cool because there were these sand artists.
Yeah.
And they started early in the morning. There was about 15 to 20 of them. And they had a design And there was a main guy in charge, of course, who is the artist, and the others were helpers.
Yeah.
And they make like a sand maze, and everybody stays away from it, and you watch them building it. And then at some point he signals that you can come in, and everybody starts at the start point, and you walk through this entire, and it's
incredible.
It's incredible. That's
I
what it
have
is.
never seen
And
anything
it
like
only
it.
lasts until the tide comes in.
That's right. And then it's washed away.
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing amount of work.
Mm-hmm.
There were lots of people doing that, but not so many, again, that you couldn't enjoy it. So that was nice.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I mean, just where they were was beautiful.
Yeah.
Just the whole beach is gorgeous there. And the town was a lot of fun.
The town
Speaking
is a seaside.
of food,
Yeah.
they had a great little seafood shack that we ate at right downtown. I think we had some crab.
Crab. Oh, yes.
Oh, it was so good.
At a crab
so
shack.
good.
Really
And
good.
yeah,
they have a lighthouse that's really pretty.
they had a little museum.
Mm-hmm.
Some old timey houses, and it's painted up nicely. It's like a seaside, like any little seaside town, but it was fun to be in.
It's a
We
good
spent a couple of
overnight.
days
If you're
there.
looking for a place to
Yeah.
overnight, I would say Bandon is a good one if you're on that full coast road for sure. Yeah. And then because there's not a lot after that other than beautiful coastline, parks, sand dunes,
Wildlife,
beaches,
elk.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Did I say more lighthouses?
So another thing they have as you're going up the Oregon coast is the Marionberry, and Oregon is famous for the Marionberry, and they have Marionberry cobbler and ice cream and Marionberry pies and Marionberry, you name it, they got it. Shakes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And
Do you
let me tell
remember-
you, no matter what it is, you should try it because it's delicious.
We stopped at that one little,
It was just a little antique shop.
like an antique local artist.
It was an
type
antique
thing
shop with coffees.
with coffees. So that's why we stopped. And they had
Yeah.
a little chalkboard sign out front that said Marionberry pie.
Cobbler.
And cobbler.
That was cobbler.
That was cobbler. You're right. That was some of the best cobbler I've ever
It was
had.
so good. So it came in a little styrofoam bowl, so you know about how big the portion was. But they filled it up. The cobbler pretty much filled it up, and then they put like 2 huge scoops of vanilla ice cream on it. Served it with this delicious blend of coffee. I don't know. It was one of our favorite things of the whole trip. So
And if I was
try the
looking for
Marionberry.
art, like local art, that would definitely be the place to go. We'll put that on the map too, so it's on the map.
Absolutely. It was one of our favorite places.
Also, Tillamook
Oh, yes.
Dairy is there, so you can stop at the Tillamook Creamery. And
Which in some ways, okay, so I loved going to the Tillamook Creamery, but I've got to be honest, it wasn't what I expected at all.
no, me neither.
I expected it to be not small necessarily, but I guess more rustic, more antique-y, more like days of yore kind of place. And it is
not.
not.
It's a modern facility. You don't take a tour through it. Instead, what you do is you go onto a floor above and you can walk along a hallway.
Yeah, big
that
hallway, corridor.
overlooks the factory and where all the work is being done and the cheese is being made. And it's a fascinating stop for sure.
Well, and of course, there's plenty of placards and information and little videos. I mean, it's really
well
high
done.
tech. It's really interactive. But of course, I mean, what place wouldn't have lots of cheese to try?
Mm-hmm.
I
Free
mean,
samples.
I think we had free samples galore. And then, of course, downstairs they had both a cafe and a shop.
Yeah, that's right.
And we
Enjoyed.
had some of both because we just couldn't get enough.
Yeah, that was a good stop. I really like that.
So good.
From there, you're getting up towards Astoria, which is one of our favorite cities in Oregon.
It's
and
right on
coast.
the border of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there's just a bridge across the river.
The Columbia River is the
Columbia
border.
River, and that's the border. And it is right there, and it's gorgeous. Astoria, I got to say, it's one of my favorite towns, maybe in the whole U.S. It's just got this, it's got the small town, Western.
Seaside almost feels like a fishing town, but it's not really a big fishing town anymore.
It's not, yeah. I mean, it used to be, but nowadays it's kind of built past that. But you can still get fresh fish.
Mm-hmm.
The Astoria Tower, to me, is, I guess that's one of the things that makes it feel so nostalgic because it's made out of sgraffito,
Yeah.
and which is basically,
It's got the whole history of
it's
the
just
area.
so cool.
drawn on it. It's very, very cool. And the views from there are amazing.
Yeah. And it's just got a good vibe. It's got a farmer's market downtown. It's got great coffee shops.
Yeah.
The food is delicious. And again, it's got, a lot of those old, wooden clapboard houses with porches that just make you feel so, like you said, in a fishing village, basically.
Yeah. Plus, well, at the same time, they've also got the Victorian houses and, the brickwork, like Western downtown area, which is just beautiful.
We love that town. We've been there again and again.
Yeah. So you said before the only time you did the Pacific Coast Highway was that one trip, but we've actually been on 101.
Well, we've been on different pieces of it, but
you've only done it one time from
start to finish.
I think that's probably the only time I've done from the start point to the finish point.
Yeah.
I've always just done parts of it before. So yeah, Astoria. And that's also another overnight place. Because
it definitely is, because you can go to Lewis and Clark National Park.
Yeah, there's a lot to do there.
Lewis and Clark State Park in Oregon, which has a whole interpretive center and museum, which is different than the national park. So there's actually 2 places to go there. And there's some little sites in Washington that are part of it. So it's a huge place to see just for the national park bit. But there's also other things. There's a great maritime museum there. Mm-hmm. And one of the most fun things to do there is in the pond, they do remote control boat.
Oh, yeah. That's a cool thing.
Yeah.
Some remote controlled sailboats.
Anyway, so I would spend the night in Astoria, go to eat breakfast at, what was that little piggy place called?
Pigs and Blankets, maybe?
I don't know. You can't miss it.
I knew it. And then you asked me and I dumped it.
I know. There's a little piggy place for pancakes. And
just as you first come into main downtown. Yeah. Right across from the Holiday Inn, which is a great hotel to stay in. It's got great views. I won't say that we're not sponsored by Holiday Inn. You can, if you really love us, go to one of our links and book your stay in that Holiday Inn with the fireplace and the view out on the Columbia River.
We were
and
so
we will
impressed.
Get a kickback from that. So thank you.
We were so impressed with this place. My mother came to visit right before we moved to Vietnam, and she's 89 years old. And she came because we told her how wonderful this was, and she really wanted to see some parts of Oregon. And if we're going to take her anywhere in Oregon, we were taking her to Astoria because it's so amazing. And we stayed in the Holiday Inn because the whole back of the building goes up. You have a view of the bridge, of the Columbia River. It's just stunning. And there's a fireplace in the room because it's chilly in Oregon, Yeah. So you can have a little fire looking at the view.
It's a great place to stay. Well, and the other thing she really wanted to do was
dip her toe
in the Pacific. She'd never had her foot in the Pacific. And that's definitely worth mentioning for the beaches in Oregon and then also into Washington. A lot of them have an access point where you can drive down onto the beach.
Like we went to Long Beach.
Yeah. And then you can drive out onto the beach, park somewhere on the side. I mean, we were able to drive almost right up to the water. She's a little too old. She couldn't really get out of the car and walk in sand, unfortunately. But we got her as close as we could.
Yeah, we did.
And you can do that. You can't do that. I don't think there's any beaches in California you can drive onto. No, not that I'm aware of.
Because there's too many people.
Yeah,
it would ruin it immediately. Yeah. Whereas, there just isn't that many people up.
And the beaches are much wider.
And they're cooler. It's not as hot as California. Yeah. You don't need people bathing all the time.
People, laying out on a blanket in the sun in Oregon or Washington.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Most of them are actually sitting under their hatchbacks on their car.
Or they're on the beach on chairs with jackets and hats.
Yeah.
Which we did a lot of. I'd much rather do that than be in the bathing suit.
Or they're in the water surfing with wetsuits.
With wetsuits. That's true too.
So bring your wetsuit for the surfing.
So then you continue northward.
Yeah. And if you thought Oregon was remote and like empty of people, Washington is even
on the coast.
More remote.
Until you get to Olympia, really.
Well, Port Angeles, once you come around the top, Port Angeles is a pretty decent-sized town.
It's technically a city, but it feels like a town.
Yeah, it's a small town city. That's what I would call it. I like Port Angeles. I never used to like Port Angeles. I don't know why I had this thing against it, but I really love it now. Okay, you're driving the Pacific Coast Highway or the Coastal Highway, whatever you want to call it, through Washington. You really have to have a reason to do that because a lot of it just drives through forest land. There's very few places to stop for food and gas along the way. There are places, but very few. You're not really on the coast with those stunning views anymore.
Not the whole time. Some of the time you are.
Yeah, very little bit of the time. I think the real reason you're going to do that is to do the Olympic National Park.
Right.
Because it goes all the way around and gives you access to every point in the Olympic National Park, which is a huge, huge national park.
It's so big that like there's just completely different areas of it. You know, there's
Different ecosystems.
There's the hot springs part. There's the old rainforest. There's Hurricane Ridge. There's just so many different areas. There's like the surfing part down by the reservation, the Native American area
on the coast.
On the coast, there's a lot to do and see there, and you could easily spend, if you did everything in one fell swoop, like 3 or 4 days just to do those parts of the park.
Easy.
And camping would be awesome there. There are places that you can get hotels, of course.
Oh yeah.
But we camped right inside the national park, right outside of Port Angeles, and
up towards Hurricane Ridge.
I mean, what a gorgeous campground! It was just beautiful.
Really nice. We've also stayed in the Sol Duc.
And we've stayed in Sol Duc Lodge.
Where the hot
that's
springs
right.
are. We never stayed in Lake
The
Quinault.
hot springs, to me, I guess I'm more used to a Japanese.
We're a little
hot spring.
spoiled with.
We're spoiled with
baths.
hot springs, but it was cool. Cool is the wrong word. It was interesting and it was fun. And interestingly enough, probably the most people that were there were Japanese or some other type of Asian.
We met a lot of Mongolians there.
There was Mongolians there. Yeah, that was interesting.
Interesting. I enjoyed it. But yes, was it at the same quality level as like a Japanese onsen? Definitely not. But it would be hard to keep it that way because it's a different culture.
Well, and our culture gets so worried about, not that the Japan isn't. Japan's very health and safety oriented too, but ours kind of goes over the top a lot of times with that.
Yeah. But in Japan, you're also not going to wear your flip-flops into the water.
Yeah.
Which some people were.
Yeah.
Or right up to the water.
It was all very, very cool. So you go around the peninsula and you're going to spend a couple of days there because it's just so fantastic. The other thing I would do, which is a little bit of an offshoot, is go to the other little town there.
Sequim?
Well, Sequim you go through because you have to. It's part of the thing.
Oh,
and
Port
Sequim
Townsend.
is cute. But yeah, I was talking about Port Townsend.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's another cute. And that's more town than
it's
Port
not
Angeles
technically
is.
On the coastal highway.
It's not technically on it,
but its access is off the coastal highway and there's no other way to it. So
and I mean, we're talking, you're close, so go. And it's just cute little shops. There's a soda shop there.
Another very historical downtown. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just really beautiful. You can take a ferry from there actually and go over to Seattle.
You can. There's a couple of spots.
Or to Vancouver. Port Angeles is where you can go to Vancouver.
Yeah. Which we didn't mention from Port Angeles.
Which is worth going to.
Yeah, you could easily, if you made that your stopping point and your base for that stretch, you could spend a half a day or a day and take the fast ferry over to Victoria in Canada.
And you don't have to spend the night in Victoria if you do it that way. But you could. Victoria's a cool city in and of itself. And yeah, it's another story altogether. But yeah, you've got access to a lot more than you can kind of realize. It feels like you're out in the middle of nowhere. And wow, you can take a ferry to Canada. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But then you basically come back and you head to Olympia, the capital of Washington.
You drive down the Hood Canal. So the Hood Canal, you're back on the coast. You're right on the coast. I love that little stretch of the 101. That's heading south, even though you're on the south to north stretch.
Because you're kind of done like a circle almost.
That always kind of gets me. I love that. And yeah, Olympia is the endpoint, the capital of Washington. It's got a beautiful Capitol building. It's got a beautiful historic downtown. It's right on the water. So there's marinas and seafood.
Again, there's like a little market area where you can go get foods and coffees and stuff, which is just really wonderful.
Cherry blossoms if you're there at the right time of year.
Oh yeah, if you're there, during spring.
It's a beautiful little town.
The capital's got tons of cherry trees, so it's really pretty. Yeah, it's a beautiful city and there's lots to do there. And there's lots of really good seafood restaurants there as well. And our favorite little bakery.
Oh yeah, West Bank, East Bank, what is it called?
I don't know. We'll have to look it up.
We do all this research for these podcasts, and then we think of things as we're doing it after the research.
Yeah.
And they come up. So we'll put those in the show notes.
But it is a great little French bakery, and we go there to get the little quiches. Their quiches are amazing.
Yeah.
And their croissants are amazing.
Very good,
we
too.
don't get the coffee there. Get the coffee at another coffee shop.
It's okay, but there's better coffee.
It's not worth. No, I don't. It kind
And
of.
it's
No,
overpriced.
Don't do it. Get the pastries.
Yes, the bakery itself is great. Okay, so we should talk a little bit about the timing. We mentioned like you would spend the night, you would stop in Bandon, you would stop in Astoria. Further north,
down in California, you can stop just about anywhere.
Yeah, we didn't really mention it. I mean, you really have to think about where you want to spend your time.
Yeah, Carmel by the Sea is
a
gorgeous.
Great stop. Santa Barbara is a great stop. Of course, San Francisco is a great place to stop.
LA.
But you want to go from Carmel by the Sea and then stop in San Francisco. It's a little close.
Well, it depends on how much you're doing there.
But you could, like if you spent your time at Carmel by the Sea, you had, like say for instance, you had to drive in and out of Big Sur because of the road closure.
Yeah.
For sure. And then the Monterey Aquarium is right there. There's so much to do right there.
We skipped over Monterey.
Yeah. So we didn't really mention the places there, but heading further north, really once you get to Oregon, you want to have it planned out
a little bit.
Bandon to Astoria. Once you're in Washington, I would recommend like one of the lodges in the park.
Which means you have to plan that ahead of time, though.
But you have to really plan that ahead of time.
Like
otherwise,
6 months.
Otherwise, it's Forks, which is doable. It's a very small town. If you've read that vampire series, it takes place in Forks. So it has a little bit of that infamy, even though there's nothing really there other than a really cool lumber museum.
Yeah, it's got a neat
lumberjack museum. I really like that.
It's very small. I don't know if I would want to stay in
There's a couple of
Forks.
hotels there, but really I would say the park is the better bet.
In the park or near the park in Port Angeles.
Well, once you get to Port Angeles, you've gone too far. Because now you're past the park and you have to come back to do the park. Driving from Astoria north, if you're going to spend time in the park, you got to stop somewhere before Port Angeles. You could drive all the way to Port Angeles. It's like a 7-hour, 8-hour drive on that stretch just to drive it. So for me, if you're heading south north, it's a bit much. I would stop somewhere first.
Well, we personally don't like to drive more than like 4 or 5 hours.
Exactly.
Even on road trips where some people think, and maybe we used to do this too, where you drive and you stop and then you drive and then you stop and then you drive and then you stop. And finally it's pitch dark outside and you're starving to death and you need to find a hotel. Yeah. I mean, we've done that too, but that's not really the road
it's not a good way
trip
to do it.
that we do anymore. We like to really minimize our traveling times to about 4 hours of driving.
Right.
And if that's cut up, that's all the better.
Hopefully it is. Right.
Yeah. Because then you don't get, road weary.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, you can't head out on a stretch that's 7 or 8 hours of driving and expect to do anything along the way because it's just going to get too long and you'll get to your destination way too late.
So I guess when you're saying how much time, you really need to look at the different sites where you want to plan that part ahead of time before you go. You can wing it. I mean,
definitely.
You definitely can.
High
Winging
season,
it is not a problem.
You probably should have some good, the important places that you want to be, make reservations.
But I would suggest, because it's populated in California and because it's high season and because the national park stuff books up early, I would suggest really looking at it about 6 months out and making some reservations in those key spots.
Yeah.
Because I think you'll feel more relaxed. And personally, the less stress you have,
relaxed.
The better
Don't
it is.
get stressed. It's
That's
not a good road trip if anybody's stressed.
Exactly. But you will love the Pacific Coast Highway. It's everything from eclectic to artsy to tasty and, plus it's got these great views and you're on the coast and you can stop and on some of the, depending on the fire ban or whatever, you can have fires on the beaches. Some places just collecting driftwood. You can go surfing in so many of the places. You can go, you can just
tide pooling.
I mean, there's just really no end. There's lots of wildlife. I love the pelicans at Pismo. Just there's
another one
so
of my
much.
favorites for sure.
Yeah, so much to do and see there. So if you get a chance to do that, I would say we did it in 3 weeks and we pretty much did everything we wanted. We took our time. We didn't just, bang it out. So it took us about 3 weeks to do it. I don't know that you need 3 weeks. You could probably do just as much
2
in
weeks.
10 days or 2
10
weeks.
days.
Or you can barrel through and probably do it in like 3 days if that's what you want to do.
No way.
You don't think you can do it in 3 days?
No
4 days?
way. 5 days, I think. If you're driving the the route all the way up.
Yeah, I mean, you're winding and
5 days.
going up and down hills and stuff. So
Because you're not going to be barreling through at night, for instance. If you're doing a road trip, like to see the scenery, of course you don't want to drive at night anyway. But this is windy roads. There's animals on the road.
And
it's
elk.
not a safe place. Like some people like to do their major driving at night, right? Because there's less traffic.
I wouldn't suggest it.
If that's what you need to do, like that time constraint is there, don't do the Pacific Coast Highway, or don't do a lot of it. Just do a little bit of it. And then if you have to go north, head into I-5 and head north, or in Southern California, stay on the 101. But then out of California, get back to the I-5 if you got to keep going north, because it takes a long time.
All righty. At any rate, the point was you're going to love the Pacific Coast Highway.
Take the time, get out there, roll down the windows. Don't put the top down. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love, hit the like button, and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.